everybody, and welcome to my tutorial on dual rates and exponential. We're going to use a DX6E for our lab partner, so to say. So this video is more or less geared to the beginner. For people that are like, I don't really understand dual rates, help me understand it. And that's our goal. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to help you try to understand travel. So we've got a servo set up here that I've got a little pointer on. And as I move my elevator, up elevator, and down elevator. This is full 100%, it's taking us to 45 degrees. So, if that's too much or too little, that's where travel comes in. So this is 100%. If we went to, on our radio, and went to servo setup, we have travels here. So this is elevator. So let's say we're looking at our manual and it says, okay, we need 30% travel, or 30 degrees travel. We would go down, and what I like to do is I hold my elevator, and when you're holding it, you'll see that box is blinking there for up elevator. So I'm holding up elevator, and I'll start turning it down. You see my little pointer, as I'm going down, it's going down. So let's say that right there is 30 degrees. Looks good to me. We ended up at 58. So let's round it up to 60. And we'll do the same thing for down. Go down. It looks like it's 30 degrees. So just kind of gives you the idea. So now that you might understand travels a little bit better, and this is full travel, let's understand what a dual rate is. A dual rate is a type of flight mode. A flight mode can be a mode or a switch position on your transmitter that changes the way or changes the flight characteristics that an airplane or an aircraft flies. There can be a lot of different things that have to do with flight modes. Dual rates and changing travel is one of them. So, dual rate. Dual rates changes travel. All right, so let's say we're looking at our manual. And it says it recommends 20 millimeters up for full high rate and 15 up for low rate. So instead of degrees or percentages, a lot of times they'll give you a measurement. So for a measurement, what we like to have is a ruler. I got my trusty E-Flight ruler. Not going to be quite big enough for our example here, but for a control surface, this little guy works great. Pretty much any precision ruler like this, it's got millimeters on it, is what you want. What I like to do is try to find a middle point on my ruler, like let's say 80 millimeters, and go up and down from there. So let's pretend this is a control surface, and our manual says it wants 20 millimeters up deflection. So we'll start in the middle at 80, and we'll make little increments of 5. 5, 20, 10, 15, 20. So 80, 75, 70, 65, 60, 85, 90, 95, 100. So, our manual says go up 20 millimeters. So, high rate we want to be about here. We line it up, so we move we deflect our surface, and it ends up being right about here. And same thing with this guy. We want to be right about there. Right, so we got our ruler lined up with our control surface. As we deflect it, we look at the numbers, and that's where we want to get for our high rate. And reduce our high rate of travel, and what we want to do is we want to go to the DR and Expo menu, and we're going to choose a switch that we want our rates to be on. And you can just flip the switch or you can choose it. I like to just flip the switch, makes it easy. And then we want to decide, okay, what position am I comfortable with my high rates being on? Down or up? Reason would think up would be high rates. So we'll keep it up. We'll go up to dual rate. That's the travel percentage. So right now we're at 100%, right? 100% is 45. We're going to turn it down. When we pull the stick up for up elevator, or down for up elevator, it will put a box around that up percentage. So we'll turn it down, and we'll turn it down until we get to that 20 millimeters up that our manual asked us to go to. All right? And then same thing for down. We'll hold down elevator. It'll put a box around that. And we'll go down until our surface lines up with -20 or down 20 from 80. That's what we set there because we're pretending that our ruler is in the middle, right? So our ruler in the middle would be 80. We go down to 60. All right, so that's our high rate. Not always going to end up on the same numbers. Just your position or your goal is that we have the same amount of travel. It's a measurement. All right, so now we flip the switch to go to our low rate. Right now it's going back to a default 100. But let's say our manual said that our low rate, we wanted it to be 15 millimeters from center. So we'll do the same thing. We'll hold it and go down till we're at 15. Or 95, which is, 15 away from 80. Same thing here, down till we get to 65. So you'll see that we're lining it up like that. See? Lining it up. So now we've got high rate, we've got low rate. You can hold the stick and flip the switch. Hold the stick and it'll move. So that's dual rates. You do that with each control surface, and you can do, with this radio, you can have up to 3 of them. I put it on a 2-position switch just for a high and a low. Most beginner planes, you don't need much more. Dual rates are user preference. You may not like this. You may feel like that you want more to fly the plane or less. That's up to you. If you have more, than what the manual recommends for a particular model, you could run the risk of stalling the plane, having some adverse characteristics when you fully deflect the control surfaces. So you got to be careful of that. So going with what's recommended is always great, but it's up to you. It's your plane. And then same thing for too low. If it's too low, it may not have enough control authority to really get through a turn or whatnot. That's dual rates in a nutshell. We'll go to Exponential Expo for short. Expo is in reference to a graph, essentially. So this is a 1-to-1 movement at this point. If I'm moving the stick 10%, it's moving 10% of the travel that we have assigned. Expo gives us a graph. So let's call this X, Y, and 1-to-1 would be a straight line. That would be no expo. That would be 0% expo. So let's say we want 20%. What that does is instead of a straight line, it puts a curve to it. So say that's our expo curve, or exponential curve. So when let's say we move our stick 50%, this is stick input, this is surface. Say we move the stick 50%, we're going to get 50% movement here, right? It's a 1-to-1. But with exponential, we move the stick 50%, we're only getting, let's do dashes. we're getting, instead of 50% here, we're getting, let's say, 25% movement. That makes it so smaller controls, and we'll kind of show how it works here. Let's go back to high rate. Let's go to full travel. Make it a little bit easier to see. Clear that. So we're at 0% expo, and it even gives us that little single little graph, kind of like what I drew there. So let's go, let's say we're going to go to 25% expo. And then we'll go to the low rate and clear that out so you can see what the difference is. So I'm going to try to hold the stick, and you can kind of see it's got this number down here. The first number is input, and the second number is output. So you see that I'm holding the stick at about 25, 30%. The output is more like 18, 20%. When I flip the switch, it's a 1-to-1. And you can see it puts a curve into the graph. Same kind of curve that we've got there. Pretty simple, there's no measurement really involved, it's just finding what's good. One thing that I like to do when I'm putting in expos is, so let's say our low rate, and you can always stick with the same number in expo. What I like to do is when I'm doing expo, let's say we've got this curve here, right? The curve on the map, or on the graph. When I flip the switch down, let's say we're just going to go to a basic 70%. It works well for us. And I'll flip the switch back and forth. So I look at the curve, I look at this line, and I say, okay, at this point, it's kind of, because I'm a thumb flyer, or a pinch flyer, I use small increments. And that's really the key to flying, is don't bang the sticks. You just small corrections. But you don't want those small corrections to be different in different flight modes, at least that's my opinion. You want it to be, these small corrections to feel the same in both flight modes, or both dual rates. So, an easy way to visualize that is to look at this graph. So I'll add in some expo, and I'll flip the switch back and forth. And does it look like the curve, at least for the most part, around those small movements, are about the same position? That's what we're getting for. We want it so my small corrections feel the same when it's around center. That way I don't feel like I'm flying a completely different plane when I'm flipping my dual rates. My dual rates I'm just using for more travel. Okay, so a little explanation about flight modes. Dual rate is a flight mode. Dual rates and exponential is a flight mode. In this day and age, flight modes, it's used to describe a lot of things. A lot of our safe planes, AS3X planes, they have different flight modes which incorporate the receiver, and what it does is it is listening to a channel on the radio, like the gear channel, to say, okay, we're gonna go into a mode where it stabilizes the plane, right? That's a flight mode, yes, but it's controlled by the receiver. Whereas a flight mode on your radio is a set of circumstances, a set of mixes, dual rates that you use to change how the plane flies with your radio. So it's more about your radio than the receiver in the airplane. A lot of people will get confused as to what a flight mode is. There's a flight mode menu on the radio that kind of adds to the confusion, but we're going to go over that menu and show you how it works. The flight mode menu is flight mode setup right here, and we can put it on a switch. We can put it on our D switch, right? And it'll tell us the 3 flight modes that we've got. When you flip the switch, it says, okay, flight mode 1, flight mode 2, whatnot. And you can change the name of the flight mode if you like, and there. So what the flight mode does is we can set our dual rates on our flight mode switch, like that. Now we got 1, 2, 3, right? A lot of people use flight modes. What I like to use them for is different mixes. You've got, rudder compensation mixes, already pre-baked into here. You can make your own mixes, and you can assign that mix to be on when your flight mode is in a certain position. Let's say you got a aerobatic plane and you want to set up a stall turn flight mode. So your stall turn flight mode, usually you don't have a whole bunch of aileron or elevator travel, but you have a bunch of rudder, and then you want to have a mix so that when you give rudder, it'll compensate with a little bit of aileron, because your plane, maybe it wants to roll a little bit when you have aileron or when you have rudder or yaw. So you can use that to incorporate. So let's kind of pretend we're doing that. So when we give it rudder, it's when we're flying it, we see, okay, when we give it full rudder, our left wing wants to go down. So we put in a rate, say 20%, to make it visually appealing. So and if you look at the monitor, and then we want to put it on a switch, put it on the D switch. So when we look at the monitor, when our switch is up, we'll call it our stall turn mode. You see the aileron deflects with the rudder. But let's say we don't want that all the time. We want it to be normal without that. This applies for anything that you can assign a switch to. If you go through a menu and you have a switch, that means you can assign it to one of your flight modes. So that flight mode can incorporate mixes, it can incorporate throttle curves, it can incorporate channel positions. So if you do have something that's got a gyro on it, you can incorporate that. That's easy enough to do in the channel assignment mode. So we go here, let's say we want our gear switch, our gear channel to move with our flight mode, like that. So if we go back to the main screen, when we move our D switch, our gear channel is moving, right? We can kind of write out what our flight modes are, right? So we'll do flight mode, F mode. We got 1, 2, and 3, and each one has its own function. Let's say number 1, stall turn. All right, that's our stall turn flight mode. And then flight mode 2 we'll say is our 3D flight mode, because we're flying a 3D plane. And then number 3 we can have be our landing mode. So stall turn, we might have low rate on aileron, and elevator. A mix, a rud to aileron mix that turns on. So this is on. That's number 1. 3D mode, let's say 3D mode is just high rates on all things. And sometimes you'll have what's called spoilerons, what people will call them, where your ailerons will move with your elevator to kind of help with lift. So you could do a spoileron mix and an idle up. A lot of people will do an idle up, and that would be in your throttle. So you go idle up. And then your landing mode could be where you've got a low idle, you've got like a mid rate, and let's say you've got flaperons. Your ailerons we're using for flaps, just to kind of create some more, some drag or lift. You could put like half flap, let's say. And that's just an example of what flight modes on your radio can do. Is you have a position 1 incorporates these 3 different things, position 2 incorporates these things, and position 3 incorporates these things. And you can name them, that's what the flight mode name is there, these different things, so you recognize that's what they're for. In the same train of thought, it works really well for like gliders, for helicopters. You'll have different idle ups with different rates of travel. As you get more versed into the hobby, you'll figure it out more, what you can do with what, essentially. But, I mean, for beginners, the only flight mode you're going to use is going to be dual rates. As you get better at it, as you start to experience different yaw characteristics, roll characteristics in your plane, you're like, hey, if I do this with the mix, I might be able to kind of tune that out. And that's what mixes and flight modes will help about. Hopefully my little seminar, my tutorial on dual rates and exponential helps you understand how flight modes work and the different things that your Spektrum radio can accomplish if you just know how to use them. So, thanks, and have a great night.